sleeps, pal.
Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is sponsored by Pat FinTech, the training partner that demystifies fintech and digital finance for financial services professionals. On the show this week, we've got Robert Alice.
Hi, I'm Robert Alice, artist based in London, majority working in crypto and NFTs.
Sharing his story on how Bitcoin, and to quote Robert, and its essential ties to the past instead of the perpetuated perception of its radical severance with it, was the catalyst for a melting pot of inspiration for his mesmerizing artwork, Portraits of a Mind. Also the crossover from physical art into digital art with non-fungible tokens or NFTs, why the NFT space is so important to the commercial side of the next frontier of art, as well as the intersection of artistry and entrepreneurship, all right here on Money Never Sleeps.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Robert, listen, I've had a look at Portraits of the Mind and I'm completely mesmerized.
Well, thank you.
There's a lot to this project. Before we get into Portraits of a Mind, can you tell us your backstory and how you got to this point?
Yeah, so I've been in and around crypto for quite a long time and also been an artist for a very long time. And about 2016, 17, as I got into crypto, like one of the things that I always do if I encounter something I don't really know about is go to the place that I do know a lot about, which is art, and try and understand the space from the cultural production around it. And I guess as I started looking around, like I was disappointed in 16, 17 about the level of work that was being made in this space. There had been some interesting NFT projects, but it was like a canary in a coal mines, really. And that was frustrating for me because it was like there was a lot of kind of kids on rocket ships going to the moon. And I just felt like this was going to be one of the most important cultural transformations of the 21st century. And so our art history needed to reflect that. And so starting in 2017, I started to lay the groundwork for Portraits of a Mind. And that's where I moved into the crypto and NFT space.
Okay. All right. That helps. I hear you about, the rocket ships going to the moon and seeing some of the stuff that's out there, because in looking at Portraits of a Mind, it is about so much more. And can you tell us about how that project got started? And tell us what it is. Tell us what is Portrait of a Mind.
So Portrait of a Mind was, I guess, kind of the largest physical work of art that was made in the space to date. And it's basically a work of art in 40 fragments. And it takes as its centerpiece version 0.1.0 of Bitcoin's code. As I was examining the space for something of cultural value, like it just kept leading back to this set of code, which obviously without it, none of us would be here. We wouldn't be talking, and kind of this whole reevaluation of value, money, decentralization, privacy, and trust would not have happened over the last decade. So, and for me, it was quite interesting because that code base had been largely hidden and it been squirreled away, and it'd been kind of massively changed, obviously, as Bitcoin was the core.
That's all right.
That was my pepper cellar.
That was your what?
That was my pepper cellar.
Your pepper cellar.
Yeah, it's just fallen off my table.
That's all right.
And anyway, back to Bitcoin. But yeah, that code base has rapidly changed now as Bitcoin Core has been developed. And so really it kind of looked at it as a kind of historical document. And for me, it was a more interesting historical document than the white paper because it'd been hidden from view. And so the idea really was to take that and then very simply just decentralize it and spread it around the world and fragment it. And so that conceptually as an artwork, each collector or holder of the project, the artwork only really makes sense if you know that there are 39 other works out in the world. And also sort of, 39 NFTs because each work comes with an NFT. And so it took about 3 years to make. Bitcoin's code is quite long. It's like 12.8 million digits and one needs to be hand painted. And then each of the NFTs needs to be made. And yeah, it was a very quiet, solitary process for 2 years. And it was nice. In many ways, it was a kind of like, it sounds pretentious to say, but it was an interesting reflection on like, how Satoshi must have felt,
Big time. I got that.
And I think that was an interesting thing for me, was to build something in my head and physically, because it's called Portraits of Mind. It's about this idea of how do you make a portrait of someone who doesn't exist or hasn't been seen, who has no visual identity. And I settled on this idea that looking at Bitcoin's code, that Satoshi really is more the code behind Bitcoin than an individual behind the code. And really it's just an identity that was created to release Bitcoin. So it's part portraiture, it's part decentralization. And then, so starting late 2019, early 20, I started showing it to a few collectors. And the first one was, I guess, just like took pity on me for spending 3 years painting 8 million digits. And then slowly it gathered steam, and some interesting people in crypto started looking at it. And the Venn diagram of people who really understand art and really understand crypto is really small. And you can see that at the moment in the NFT space. That Venn diagram of people who really understand both is small. And Jihan Chu, who runs Kinetic out in Asia, is probably the apogee of that. He sits right in the middle. He's a really prominent Bitcoiner, runs one of Asia's biggest VC funds, but crucially, he was an important art advisor and art dealer and art collector, and has worked at the top of both industries. And so I sent him the project and never think I'd hear back from him. And 30 seconds later, I got a reply saying, I've been looking for this for 5 years. Can I jump on the call? 3 weeks later, he was in London, at my first dilapidated studio, and bought a painting there and then, and started showing it to a few of his friends, and then they showed it to their friends. And within 2 months, the project was on, in 13 cities on 3 continents, and was well on its way to be truly decentralized. And then I guess the public launch of the project happened at Christie's, which has obviously been interesting to think about it in terms of people and this recent auction. It's been really, fun to feel like I've played a small role in the history of NFTs, because that obviously, just before Beeple, that was really the first NFT that was sold at a major auction house. I mean, each artwork is 2 parts, an NFT and a painting. And so, and that can obviously, attracted a lot of attention. And since then, I mean, it made I think Forbes wrote the other day, which I found quite funny, it made a world record at the time. I mean, it was, as they say, they said it was pittance compared to obviously what people did last week. But no, it was my own small slice of art history, and something I'm really proud about. And then really from there, that gave it a visibility to a whole new segment of collectors, and also like very, very quiet, actually, Bitcoiners who are also big collectors at these auction houses. And since, it's gone to, paintings have gone to, I think we're now at 17 cities on 4 continents. And some are now, on show at major institutions, and are due to be out on loan at, again, some prominent art institutions in the US, and also some prominent universities like Yale, MIT, Wharton, NYU, Cambridge here in the UK. So will now be kind of public opportunities for people to see work and have a physical relationship with Bitcoin's code.
Yeah, it's massive. And just to give folks an idea of the size and scale of this, I mean, looking at some of the pictures, Robert, you've got, what looks to be the size of a small yet circular garage door. I
mean, that's a good way of describing it. They're about, I mean, each painting is about meter 30 in diameter. So if you add 40 together, it's about 50-meter painting in total. So then if you think about some of major artworks, that's like 16 meters shorter than the Bayeux Tapestry. So it was not a small undertaking, but I really felt like Bitcoin deserved a monument and something at a scale that people could grapple with. And I think, at a scale where it could really sit globally, all around the world. And so it was go big or go home.
Absolutely. And, the other side of the coin, no pun intended, is that, yes, as large as a small yet circular garage door, but also as intricate as a cuneiform tablet in terms of the inscription. And I know you were inspired by, I think, a Polish artist who wrote to infinity.
Oh, you've done your research. I'm impressed. No, I think you can like, I mean, again, this goes back to the kid on the rocket ship going to the moon. Like Bitcoin has this, and I think for people who really delved into it, like, it has this beauty, and it has this history, and it has this like deep intellectual roots out of where it came from. And it also has like these amazing similarities with the past. And I think if you look at like cuneiform tablets and the history of the written document, the history of permanence, you can find a lot that speaks around like Bitcoin is just a new way of doing old things. It's not like such a radical rupture with the past as a lot of people try and present it to be. In many ways, it resurrects a lot of the things that we did in ancient times that we don't do today. And so a lot of it was around thinking about how those histories intersect and how you can build out maybe a more nuanced and intellectual history around Bitcoin that is not just like crypto bros and rocket ships going to the moon. It's so much more than that. And then obviously from an art historical side, like, and I think this is the interesting thing. And again, we can talk about it within the NFT space too. Like there's there's a deep art history. It's hidden from view of artists that have been experimenting with a lot of the ideas around blockchain. Sometimes like 50 years before blockchains even existed. And one of them is a Polish artist who's very well known in the art world, but not really well known outside of it, called Roman Opalka. Just to talk about it from a very commercial but blunt point of view, I guess that his paintings are sort of $6 to $10 million each. So he's a very important, well-respected artist, and he started a project in the 60s where he stopped all this other work and he went to front of a canvas and painted the number 1, and then he painted number 2 and 3 and 4, and he filled that canvas up to 5,000, and then he started at the next block. You can see how this fits into Bitcoin and blockchain. He started at 5,001, and he filled that, and he started the next block. And the interesting thing is, halfway through it, he did that for his whole life, and he got to 7 million or something. And the idea was really, how do you paint infinity, or how do you paint time? And you can't paint infinity because life is finite, so you can only die trying. Yeah. And over the course of his life, he added 1% more white pigment to the background. And so by the end of his life, he was painting white on white. And so you get this idea of transcendence.
That's deep.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major conceptual art project. When you think about it, like, it really speaks to the idea of blockchain. And this guy was like, was making work 50 years before one had even been thought about, because each work is a block. You can only have, they don't make sense if you scramble the order. Do you know what I mean? There's one after the other. It was a daily routine. There was a proof of work. As they spread around the world, they kind of developed this decentralized network structure where you only really had one fragment of a wider body of work. And, if you have one of those paintings out of context, like, it doesn't mean anything if you don't know that there were these other blocks in the line before and potentially after it. And also this idea of infinity and this idea of what blockchains could engender. Like, Bitcoin could run forever. I mean, I don't think it will, but it has this potential for infinity. And so I think there will be a reevaluation of art history around some of these interesting artists that maybe work in the 60s and 70s. There's another artist called Onkurawa, again, important Japanese conceptual artist. His work is up to anywhere from $1 million to $10 million. But all he did every day was he sat down and he painted the date of the day on a painting every day for the rest of his life.
Okay.
And again, it's a similar idea. Like, this work functions like a blockchain, an artistic blockchain. And these artists will suddenly, over time, they will be collected by Bitcoiners. And I know that there are a lot of Bitcoin collectors who buy these works. But I think, sorry, to get back to your point, like, these deeper, more meaningful, more nuanced conversations around culture and where Bitcoin gets placed in are really important for building the cultural fabric of Bitcoin and the cultural groundwork for it. And I think when you start to have these conversations, all of a sudden the crypto bro side melts away, and you examine these things for the beauty that they suggest, but also have a conversation around kind of Bitcoin that's not just like up or down. It's something maybe a little bit more nuanced, a little softer, a little bit more engaged, and a little bit more relatable. And suddenly people enjoy this space from a slightly different perspective. And I think hopefully that humanizes it, and it allows over time Bitcoin's culture to enter, mainstream art institutions and things like that. And I think, people seeing a reflection of our culture and blockchain culture and Bitcoin in these important art institutions, that's when people get an opportunity to engage in these things in a way that's not just like buy or sell. And that provides or shores up, I think, a lot of the groundwork on which Bitcoin lays. And so that's really my goal, is to develop blockchain's visual culture and bring it into, I guess, a sort of like higher realm of academic and intellectual study within the arts. As much as like blockchains will go to infinity and people will say NFTs will be around for a while, like IPFS and Arweave and all these kind of NFT chains, like, they may not be around for a long time. Physical things do hang around. They have a habit of, like, we've spoke about cuneiform tablets that are 2,000 years old. And so, it was important for me to make something that was both physical and digital, because you can see a world in 300 or 400 years time where just like we do, we walk around through museums and there will be a slice of bit culture. It's important for me to think not just like, what do people want to see now and kind of what ideas do you want to explore now, but also what will have relevance in 30, 50, and 100 years' time to audiences when they're slowly starting to grapple with, hopefully, Bitcoin being completely mainstream. And where did this come from?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the key points for me. It's like the what if moment, right? And to say that, look at the historical significance of what you've done with this, Robert, and mapping back 5,000 years to all these different points in time. And just to give it a little bit more background, each of the 40 representing the first 40 Bitcoin blocks.
Yeah,
right?
so the paintings are basically titled like a blockchain 0 through 39. And so block 0 through 39. And effectively, each work is almost exactly the same except from the code base that's on it. It is a portrait of Satoshi, but also I wanted to build into this idea of a history painting that tells a story. Because also that's a lot what about a blockchain is. It is like it's a story machine, it's a history machine. It's a time machine, basically. And anyway, I just wanted to add in all these various network points where each block relates to a specific location in time, and all those locations relate to a history of Bitcoin. So they go from Hut 8 in Bletchley Park and the work Alan Turing did, all the way back to the early cryptographers in the Renaissance period, and then even further back to the first inscriptions of textual modification in hieroglyphs in the Egyptian period. And again, it was more like trying to tell this story where when you start to see that lineage and you zoom out, I guess, and you say, where has Bitcoin come from? And when you zoom out, all the noise around the last 5 or 10 years around, hacks, and that's an important part of Bitcoin's culture. Yeah. I'm not trying to whitewash it. I'm just trying to say that, like, if you zoom out, all of that stuff fades away, and suddenly you see it as just the latest iteration in a really long
big time. That's how I saw it. And I'd highly encourage folks to take a look at the Robert Alice website, at your website, to see the map. And when I went down my own rabbit hole with Portraits of a Mind, I looked at the map and looking at all of the different geographical points and their coordinates that you inscribed into each one of the 40 blocks, and looked for a couple of geographical points that were meaningful to me because I'm a map freak, right? And I like that all of this is somewhat inspired by cartography as well. So I had a look for Ireland. I live in Ireland. Obviously, found nothing in Ireland, but I've got a couple of blocks potential for the next creation to point out to you. The other ones were, I looked at Boston, right? And I saw Entropy House, who is Claude Shannon, who did a lot with cryptography back in the 1930s when he was at MIT, where my sister went. She got her PhD from MIT. And some of the things that he was talking about with regards to Boolean algebra, I understand now, okay, Boolean code, get where that's coming from, right? So that was really eye-opening. That's block 22, right? Block 21 was Brandeis University, Louis Brandeis in the 1890s, who was a lawyer / Cantabrigian, the Boston Cantabrigian, but he co-wrote one of the first papers out there on the rights of privacy, right? Exactly. So, just two examples of the historical significance that you have mapped back to get 5,000 years back and then forward again, and say that the creation point of Bitcoin wasn't just a light bulb moment that went off. It was the culmination of thousands of years of events and a building point to this. And that what if momentum of, okay, if this was the genesis point of a much larger cultural shift and revolution almost, then it's awesome to see this all encapsulated in 40 small yet circular garage doors,
Well, exactly. I mean, that's, I think that's exactly summed up what I was looking for people to take away from it. And I think the nice thing is, like, it really charts this like global history. You go and look at those maps, like they are really global. And then there's a second map, which is all the locations of the paintings that are currently exist. And again, that's another global map. And I think it really shows both how globalized the idea base around where Bitcoin came out of. It incorporates a lot of Eastern philosophy as much as it incorporates a lot of, Western infrastructure. And then when you look at where these paintings are today, it stands testament to the globalized nature of crypto and crypto networks, and also the globalization of art, because I would say about 50-50 of the collectors of the project are either kind of art collectors who are interested in technology. They are people in Bitcoin who want to have something that reflects where they've come from. And it's been really interesting actually having the conversation between the two, because these are two very different worlds. And actually you're seeing that really intersect at the moment in kind of the NFT boom. Christie's has become there's almost this battleground between the old world artists, and then the new world of crypto collectors. And I think, again, looking back through history, and I as a collector myself and someone who's kind of worked in the art world and has worked everywhere from major auction houses to galleries and museums and things like that. Like, if you understand the history of collecting as a subset of art history, then you understand that the history of collecting is really just the history of the disruption of finance. And so that starts in the Renaissance period with the Medicis. Like, no one knows of the Medicis, again, as the inventors of two-way accounting. Like, that's where they made their money, was the first proper banking ledger system. They effectively invented capitalism. But really, everyone remembers them as as the purveyors of the patrons, Michelangelo, Raphael, Da Vinci, and all the other artists that were working in and around Florence during that period. And then you move through to the Rothschilds, again, big banking family and huge patrons of the arts, but no one really thinks of them as a banking family. And then you through to America, and you have the Rockefellers, Chase Manhattan, the Guggenheims, things like that. And then it's really interesting to look at it like right at that cusp. And I've been saying for a long time, like the next class of patronage will come from the decentralized class.
Yeah. And,
it's a really simple thing, sadly. It's just follow the money. And Friday was, a whatever side of the kind of gambit you are around people and that sale, Friday was a bellwether moment in that transition. And it's been really interesting to see that over the last 10 to 15 years, the art world has really tried to court Silicon Valley, and they've established galleries in Palo Alto and San Francisco, but they haven't really been able to entice a lot of the first wave of tech tycoons into the art world. A lot of them do, like Mark Andreessen is a big collector, and there are lots of other people in and around it. But actually, a lot of these galleries, it's kind of interesting, like Gagosian closed their gallery in San Francisco last week. They've been there for 5 years. They basically failed to do what they wanted to. This is the most important gallery in the world. And then a week later, you have effectively an anonymous crypto world spending $70 million on an NFT. And for me, that's a real bellwether point. And I think there is a whole of wealth that's being created in crypto, which is only growing. And these people, they want to have things that reflect their own culture and where they've come from. And that's for good or for bad. But it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, it is. And 69 million is a big number. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is sponsored by Pat FinTech, demystifying fintech and digital finance for financial services professionals. Pat FinTech enable financial services professionals to transform their capabilities into the digital age with dedicated virtual training programs geared towards those that can develop, deliver, and monitor optimally customized user experiences balanced by appropriate governance, control, and oversight. To learn more about Pat FinTech, go to moneyneversleeps.ie/PAT FinTech. Looking back to Block 21 of Portraits of a Mind, obviously 21 million Bitcoin only ever to be mined. Block 21 being the one that is the first one to be sold as an NFT of the 40 different blocks that you created. And when this hit the press, looking back to September and October of last year, if you look at what's happened over the course of the last 4, 5, 6 months, what's happened with NFTs or non-fungible tokens has been completely unexpected. I think going back to 2017 with the CryptoKitties phase, right, that I think we will all largely dismiss to some extent. But CryptoKitties was an important step in the process, right? But looking at this now, and did you think or expect when Portraits of a Mind started making the rounds last year that we would be where we are right now with regards to, okay, people just sold digital art for $69.3 million?
Yeah, kind of like yes and no. I think with all these things, it's just like, the question is like, well, did I expect that we'd be here? Yes. Did I expect to be here so soon? No. Am I surprised? No, because it's crypto. So I think, 69 million is like, it's a huge number. Actually, it's funny, if you do the maths and you divide it by 5,000, and there's 5,000 images in it, it's $14,000 an image, which is actually value. So there's method in the madness there. And it's going to be really interesting to see what Metacoven and the Metaverse do with that work. But they've already shown that with the B20, which is what they bought it for 2.2 million, and they then tokenized it effectively, a percentage of proceeds to people, and the market cap of that is now 210 million. So they obviously have a plan, and I don't think it's a crazy number, but I think there is a kind of madness. It makes sense to an extent, and also like at an auction, it's just two people slugging it out, and so it's not really representative of where the market is. But I think I'm really looking forward to, dare I say it, like I'm really looking forward to a big, healthy crash, correction, whatever you want to call it, in NFTs, because what you have in these kind of like parabolic crypto markets is these huge inflection points around big news cycles and big ticket items. And then things die down, and the people that are like around and dedicated start building. And you saw that, you saw that in Bitcoin from 2017 to today. And, we look back at Bitcoin in 2017 and we just laugh at how basic the whole system was, Ethereum, everything else. Like, it was just like, it's funny. And I think having seen that whole cycle happen twice, you understand that we're still in a very basic cycle. In its own small section of crypto, like NFTs are the same. Like, if you think back to 2016 to 17, you had CryptoKitties, and that was a great proof of concept for Ethereum, but it fizzled out. And then all the infrastructure got built. So all the marketplaces, all the token standards, some artists started coming, some more interesting artists started coming. And now we're at this inflection point where like NFTs have crossed over from kind of being this crypto space. I remember going on podcasts, October, September, November, 500 or 600 people that were interested in these things. Now, every single museum curator, gallery director, artist, technician, archivist, like everybody knows about NFTs. And I think in many ways, it's been really interesting to see how art has become crypto's killer app. And art is really the only thing that has come out of the blockchain in a sustainable way that is not just about like finance or trading. Art really is the thing that's come out. And like, we're just at this cusp of like, it will be art and then it will be gaming. And gaming is really the big landscape for NFTs, really. I mean, art is small fry compared to in-game assets. But it's been really interesting to see that art has led the way. So no, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I mean, and thinking about the time machine that you mentioned, right? And that let's step into the time machine for a minute. And the thing is, we may not need to really step into a time machine to see something like this happen, which is that you walk into Tate Modern, right? And you see up alongside an oil canvas painting, you see a 4K screen showing an NFT, a non-fungible token connected to digital art. Right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like having my work at Christie's and for people to see the code base up on the wall next to a $20 million Picasso, like an important Jackson Pollock painting, that was a moment for Bitcoin to feel like their culture being validated. But I think you will see NFTs in museums. 100% you will. I think you'll see them within a different context. And so like if you take, I don't know, MoMA, you're going to have MoMA New York and MoMA Metaverse. And then if you take the Tate, you'll have the Tate London, Tate Britain, Tate Liverpool, Tate Knives, and Tate Metaverse. And suddenly you're going to have these online spaces where museums can suddenly escape the geographic constraints of their own building and their own architecture to build like online architectures in a similar way that we're seeing in Decentraland and crypto voxels, but like at a much greater scale, where all of a sudden, like you can be a kid in the Philippines who's 8 years old and loves some crazy artist, I don't know, from London, and you can go into the Tate Metaverse and explore and engage with this artist's work and be influenced by it.
Yeah.
And suddenly you will be able to build these cultural and artistic communities around these like online metaverse spaces where all of a sudden these institutions will be able to meet much larger audiences through digital art, VR experiences, AR experiences. Like for me, that's the true side to it. And I think, NFTs, I'm actually advising a company that's working on like a display option for NFTs. And like, I'm a big fan of it because I do think there's only a limit to how many you can hold in your MetaMask, right?
Exactly.
And you do want to enjoy them on screen in your home. I mean, for me, that's a sort of slightly commercial side of it. The real side is like thinking about an NFT as a medium and like, where is the best place to experience that? And it has to be online in a metaverse experience where the whole experience is digitally native. And so I think that's the next side. And we're still so early. I mean, if you look at Decentraland, you go through there, like they're amazing places. But like, if you think about the MoMA or the Tate building something like that, like we're still 3 or 4, 5 years off that. And, for the wholesale reevaluation of graphics and VR and metaverse architecture, like we're still so young and so raw. It still feels like dial-up internet within these spaces.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I mean, I've only been in this space for 5 years, Robert, and it feels like a lifetime, right? In that, what was that movie that Matt Damon was in? Not Mars, Interstellar, I think, where he goes down on the surface of a planet and every second that passes is like 7 days in real time. And that's what it feels like in the space, that it is moving so quickly. We've already had so many waves and ups and downs. Just shifting gears a bit, what I wanted to ask you about was your thoughts around entrepreneurship, given that artists are entrepreneurs, probably the first kind of entrepreneurs, selling your wares, right? Deciding to pack it all in and just to get going and, lock yourself into your studio, say, I'm going to build, right? I'm going to create. And like a deep tech does take, 3.5, 4 years to get a product to market, right? So it's all very relevant. And there's a huge amount of crossover there.
I think it's a really interesting story because I think it's a story that's not really like, these are questions that you don't normally get asked about. And I think actually they're really interesting questions and they're very valid questions. And I think for me, art is one of the purest forms of entrepreneurship around. Like, you are creating value out of nothing. And craft and skill can get you so far and present a level of value. But effectively, you are building a conceptual story or a narrative that you are asking people to buy in for with a product that does nothing except that makes them feel something.
Yeah.
Right? So it is truly entrepreneurship. And I think when you look through the history of art, like, some of the biggest and best artists were the biggest and best entrepreneurs. Like, Warhol was an entrepreneur. Duchamp was a huge entrepreneur. Like, they understood how markets work and how cultural production can fit into those things. And they were also really interested in money. Like, I've been reading a lot of manifestos at the moment because I'm thinking about NFT manifesto. And it's funny, like, these artists, some of the very, really important manifesto writers, from the Futurist Manifesto, Marinetti through to Dada, Nam June Pak, who's an important video artist, they wrote a lot about money, especially in these manifestos. And so it's kind of this thing, like, art and money are supposed to not be good bedfellows. But I really think and have thought about entrepreneurship over this period of time. And I really think that, like, there are various things that you can take away from the artistic process, which is about total creativity, like sacrificing nothing for an idea, complete dedication to your story and executing to it. And that's the beauty of art. You have this platform where you do not have to be practical at all. Like, if you want to go and paint 12.8 million digits, like, you can. It's your time. You can do whatever you like. And you will be found, like, as a winner or loser at the end of it. Do you know what I mean? Like, and again, you can put that on a commercial platform, or you can put that on a cultural platform and say that you are happy with doing what you're doing for that period of time. The other thing that's really interesting about that discussion about entrepreneurship in the arts is it really intersects around NFTs. And what you're seeing, and I think this is really interesting, is like, what you're seeing is artists who, well, there are two sides. One is like artists who never had a gallery or never sat in the art world, suddenly be able to have an asset value for their work, usually digital artists. And they're selling direct to consumer. They're selling to the collectors on these peer-to-peer platforms. And that's like revolutionary for the art market, because 500 years of art collecting and art sales have happened through middlemen, through galleries, with a whole song and dance around the presentation of. And this is the first time the art world is worried. I've been speaking to important dealers and collectors who are having to reevaluate, like, in 20 years' time, will people want to buy a Dali or a Picasso?
Dude, I never even thought of this. The disintermediation of the art industry.
Yeah. And I think, it's really interesting for me now. And it's something I've worked in those spaces. And for me, like, as an artist, I was never going to give someone 50% of my work, because I knew I could do it myself. And I knew that crypto allowed me a platform where I could go out and kind of make my own way. And people would respect that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't need the validation of a gallery and a brand to make this work seem more valuable. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about crypto and the people that are in it. Like, they really buy into things that they love, and they want direct engagement with those artists. And I think that's really interesting. So I think this idea that you have to give up 50% of your value of your work for a gallery, like, it's starting to change, and it's changing around NFTs. So I think this idea of entrepreneurship, like, artists now have to be much more in control of their market. And I think people for so long have kind of like passed off, the market and business side of their work to gallerists, because they kind of just wanted to make their art, and they thought that they would not be best placed to do it. But now actually it's the artists that have a really firm control of their market, really understand what they're doing, who, in a kind of increasingly professionalized art world, from an artist perspective, where, the numbers are bigger because the art world is growing, they are the winners. And so it's something that, like, I really pride myself on. It's something that I really have enjoyed. I enjoy the dealing side of what I do. I enjoy meeting collectors. Like, some artists are like, I ever want to speak to a collector. Like, I don't want to have to pitch them work. For me, it's the greatest privilege. It's the greatest privilege to like speak to someone who wants to spend some money to enjoy your work in their home or somewhere else, and to construct that deal. Like, I enjoy doing that, and I don't think I'm gonna, given that I'm in this space, I don't think I'm gonna ever let that go so much. Maybe on a project by project basis, I'd work with the gallery and give them 20 to 30% if it was the right thing to do. But I'm not going to sort of develop these kind of long-standing, kind of slightly feudal relationships, because it's just not commercially sensible anymore.
Yeah, you don't have to anymore be, well, I'm just going to create and then, okay, I'm going to let someone else handle this, right? Because the mechanism is there for you to bring this to market yourself.
What's really interesting is like you look at the people mechanic, and he is really symptomatic of what this space has done, for better or for worse to an extent, because he's built a career in a commercial sense. He's only been an artist for 13 years. We've been speaking about Roman Opalka, this Polish artist, One to Infinity. Like, people's work is very similar. Like, these are things that are going through blockchains in an interesting way. But what's happened is these artists or commercial artists, especially in the digital space, who have built large followings on Instagram and Twitter, can now use NFTs to monetize their audiences direct to consumer, and also build it out in a way that is like run through Instagram, where collectors can have a direct line to people, his life, his practice, what's going on, and feel really, really in it. And it's not mediated by a kind of high-end, slightly haughty gallery where sometimes you don't feel like you belong. And that works if you're like old world, like sophisticated, understand all your cultural reference points, and like studied art history. That kind of space works because maybe you feel comfortable in it. But for a whole bunch of people in crypto and a whole bunch of people in tech, who spent their lives like in code doing very creative things, but haven't spent their time like in culture, so much nicer to have a direct relationship with an artist where they can see what they're doing all the time and like learn about their work, rather than having it mediated by like, a white cube gallery space where you can hear a pin drop.
Yeah, but just kind of rounding out that thread a bit in thinking about, you mentioned Mark Andreessen before from A16Z, his partner Ben Horowitz. I've read a couple of his books, really just deep thinker about the entrepreneurial space. So Ben Horowitz said, as a startup founder, I slept like a baby. I'd wake up every few hours and cried, right? Thinking about you and doing my rabbit hole exercise to get ready to talk to you today, Robert, I imagined you painting these massive discs, right? Was there ever a moment where it was, oh my God, I've got to get up and keep writing these numbers and painting these numbers? Yeah. Or was it just a joy throughout?
Well, I think there's two things about it. Again, if you want to talk about it in terms of the entrepreneurial side of it, I had real conviction to the point that like I would get up and I would feel anxiety that I wasn't getting this out fast enough, because I knew that there was a huge opportunity to claim a lot of the cultural and intellectual high ground around Bitcoin and make an art project because there had been nothing like, there had been nothing, really nothing around that was of interest and a kind of at a conceptual and intellectual level that worked within the traditional fine art world. Like, there was nothing around. And I was working this project for 2.5 years, and like I was worried that there was something that was going to come around. And so I had real conviction in the idea and the execution of it. And then I settled into the process. And of course, there was a lot of time to think it through and doubt oneself and like, what you're doing. And there were a lot of like, I'd sold all my Bitcoin. Bitcoin funded this project. It wasn't much. It was a couple of Bitcoin in 2017 that I'd managed to trade away and squirrel away. But it was enough for 3 years of living life and getting a small studio that was literally at the time like twice the size of this table. And so there were moments where it was pretty tough. And like you speak to people that know me, and like there were definitely some tough moments. And it's been such a joy to see that project now kind of really out in the world and really like an amazing reference point for a lot of NFT artists and people interested in crypto and curators and critics, and also the commercial success that came around with building a project like that. And so yeah, I think there's definitely the standard about just hard work pays off and commitment to something pays off, and that you may get that further down the line. But effectively, like the deeper you go, the more time, the more preparation you get, the better the result over the long term, I think. And it's been really interesting to see that like the two art projects that Christie's have put on a pedestal in the NFT space were like people who sat down for 13 years and made an artwork for every day. Like, you can't get around that. Like blockchain, you cannot get around that time. Do you know what I mean? And equally for me, like sitting down and painting 12-point images, you just can't get around that. Like that takes integrity and it takes conviction and it takes time.
Shortcuts.
Exactly. There's no shortcuts. That's the value. And so I think from a kind of entrepreneurial point of view, like, be as creative as you like, especially in your marketing, be mad and commit yourself to something and make sure you see it through.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that. Rounding out to our final question, Robert, that we ask everybody on this podcast. What is one thing that people wouldn't expect to know about you?
Oh, good question. Oh, it's easy. I'm a triplet.
You're a triplet?
I'm a triplet. There are two other Roberts out there.
Oh my God. And are they engaged in similar passions?
Yeah, they are. So actually my brother kind of got me involved in crypto. He's been in crypto for a long time and just really is, privately really. And my other brother dabbles in it. He's kind of pissed off because me and my other brother have been talking about it for years, and he feels he keeps thinking he's missing the boat. But yeah, so no, we're all involved in Bitcoin.
Connected brains, connected minds.
I don't know. I mean, people always say that, but I definitely have a really, really deep and close relationship with both of them, and it's been a real privilege to spend your life growing up with someone else who's literally a second older or a second younger than you.
I hear you. That's fascinating. That's fascinating. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. And the smile that you see on my face now that the listeners can't see, that's going to be firmly implanted for a little while. My cheeks are a bit sore just from connecting with you on so many topics here that I never thought were going to be possible. But again, thank you.
Great. Well, it's a real pleasure.
That does it for this week, folks, and I highly recommend that you check out Robert's website, robertallis.com, to learn more about Portraits of a Mind, whatever your walk of life. It is truly fascinating. All the links are in the show notes on our website at moneyneversleeps.ie, so check us out online and subscribe to our weekly Money Never Sleeps newsletter as well. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm the founding partner of Norio Ventures, and I'm an early-stage startup advisor and investor focused on fintech and digital assets. If you'd like to talk to me about your business, drop me a voicemail on moneyneversleeps.ie. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!